Greetings all and welcome to another F4U Corsair inbox review. In this video we'll be taking a look at the Academy F4U-1A Corsair, which was originally released in 1998 but has been reissued several times, most recently being in 2019 according to Scalemates. Previously we had a look at the Hasegawa Corsair and it was still pretty decent despite its age, so let's have a look at this one and see if Academy managed to improve their Corsair kit with another 15 years or so in modelling technology. So having a look at the box, we have a really nice painted picture of two Corsairs flying over what looks like the Pacific. Both of them are slinging bombs and appear to have shot down something that vaguely looks Japanese. So some really nice little bits of action there, and both Corsairs look really nice. Then in the top we've got the scale of 1/72nd and the title of US Navy Fighter F4U-1. Then down here we've got a warning that glue and paint are not included, and my favourite warning on all boxes from model kits that the actual product can be a bit different from pictures shown on this box. Down in the right side here we have the Academy logo and a link to their website. On the bottom side here we've got some little details about fully engraved panel lines and rivet details being included, options to have the canopy opened or closed along with the landing gear, and a detailed cockpit and landing gear which we'll have to have a look at shortly. We've got some really nice finished pictures of a prototype model there that look really great, giving you a little bit of an idea of the detail of this kit and also a bit of inspiration for when you're building it. The sides of the box are just a repeat of the box art and details with some nice little schematics of the Corsair, and on the top here we have all of our various warnings about ages, not handing it to a child who might eat it, and also that there are no glues or paints included, and there's also a barcode. On the back of the box there's nothing, which is pretty typical for Academy, and as usual it's a top opening box. On this side I've also got the price tag from Hobbyrama in Brisbane where I bought this kit, and it was $21.95 AUD, which we'll talk about towards the end of the video. Now I've already cut the tape on this one to open it up, but inside basically what we have is a set of instructions, a bag here containing all of our sprues, and a separate bag for the clear parts inside this bag to protect those. We've got a set of decals in this little bag here, and we've got various warnings and some picture and information guides for if you're just starting out and this is your first model. The instructions feature the box art done in black and white, and then below that we've got our various keys, another little picture of the finished model, and we've got the same warnings that we have on those other sheets. Unfortunately, the instructions in this kit are a fold out, although you can basically fold it over on each of the creases if you're at a particular step. It does take up a little bit more room than if it was a booklet. On the inside we've also got our paint guide here, which is sort of spread over these two pages, and it's indicated by this little triangle which we can see at various stages during assembly. It appears we've got a number that's just randomly assigned to each colour and a name for each colour, so no codes, so you'll have to do a little bit of work to figure those ones out when you're building this model. As is typical, this kit starts its assembly with the cockpit, and as you can see we've got first up a cockpit tub piece with some rudder pedals moulded to it, and you're adding a seat and a joystick to it. Now unfortunately this kit seems to be just like the Hasegawa kit in that it has a cockpit floor, whereas in reality early model Corsairs didn't really have a floor for the part of the cockpit here. Instead they sort of had just the framework for the rudder pedals, but I can understand they've sort of done this to make things a bit simpler. Moving on, you've then got a instrument panel which you don't have any decals for. You basically just have to paint the base of it black, and then by the looks of things there's some raised details which you can paint white. And once you've painted it up you can join that and the cockpit to one of the fuselage halves and then join those two together. For step 3 we're assembling the wings here by adding the radiator details to the lower half before then joining these two upper halves to the lower part of the wing there. Step 4 then consists of assembling the engine, which has a piece here for the back of the cylinders and then another one here for the front row and the gearbox. And you can install this little pin inside there, and if you don't glue that to the engine details it should be able to rotate. But once you've assembled that, you can add that to the front of the fuselage, and then you can also add the horizontal stabilizers and the wing assembly. For step 5, we've got a optional antenna, which I believe is going to be based on which particular Corsair in this kit you're building, but also you've got the engine cowling and the propeller, which you're gluing to the front there. Then for step 6, we've got the two landing gear to assemble. We've got a left and a right side here, although assembly is pretty similar. You've basically got the main strut with these two little smaller pieces that you attach on either side, And once you've done that, you can then add the wheel and the front sort of cover on the front part of the strut there. Once you've assembled both the left and right landing gear, you can join them to the underside of the wings, and there's two little landing gear doors for the rear section on either side. There's also a little bit of drilling out by the looks of things, which I suspect would be if you're adding a fuel tank or a bomb. Turning over the page, we've then got the canopy, which as you can see comes in two halves. We've got the front windshield here, which is the same regardless of which aircraft you're doing. And then you've got either a fully glazed canopy or this one here with a little bit of framework, depending on which aircraft you're doing. Then we've got our tail wheel here with the tail hook molded to it, very similar to all the other Corsairs we've seen. And once that's installed, you've then got these little landing gear doors to add to the back. And finally, for step 9, we've got the option to add either a external drop tank or a single bomb, which I believe is a 250 or a 500 pounder. But basically, once those halves are assembled for them, you can then either add the fuel tank or you add the bomb onto this little kind of pylon piece and attach like so. And that's pretty much it for assembly. It's very similar to the Hasegawa kit in that a lot of the steps are pretty much identical and a lot of things are sort of a bit simple, but it looks a little bit more detailed, and I suspect as we have a look at the plastic parts, it's going to be of a better quality. On the other side of the instructions, we've got our marking guides, and unfortunately, once again, they're in black and white, although the Corsairs do tend to use pretty standard colors with the US Navy, so it shouldn't be too difficult to figure out the correct color. We have two schemes included, the first of which is done in the Middle War kind of dark blue on top with the medium blue in the middle and then flat white undersides, and it appears we've got red outlines on the roundels from late 1943, and as usual for Corsairs, the outer wing part that folds is painted in the medium blue. So this particular aircraft is from VF-17, and of course that's the famous Jolly Rogers, as you can tell by the flag, and it's the aircraft flown by Commander Tommy Blackburn in late 1943. Now, I had a quick Google, and Tommy Blackburn, I believe, is the first commander of VF-17, and it was him who came up with the name, and his other pilots also helped with designing the insignia. And apparently they also used to refer to the Corsair as the Hog, hence why this one's been nicknamed a Big Hog, and you've got his little kill tally of 4 Japanese aircraft at the time on the side of the aircraft. So I think it's a really interesting scheme, and I don't think many brands have actually done a Jolly Rogers Corsair. Apart from Revell, I think their other F4U-1 that we haven't looked at does have a Jolly Rogers scheme, but this one in particular is quite cool. For our second scheme, we have one from VMF 212, flown by Captain P.C. DeLong in 1945. Now, this aircraft is done up in a late war dark gloss blue all-over scheme, and it was flown by Philip C. DeLong, who achieved 11 and 2/3 kills in World War II, as can be seen on the fuselage here. I don't actually know how you get 2/3 of a kill, but if anyone is a little bit more knowledgeable, definitely share it in the comments. But basically, he flew the Corsair in not only World War II, but also Korea, although this one is from World War II, I believe. So we've got two really interesting schemes included, and I like that they've chosen one from earlier in the war that's a little bit more complex, or this late one with the all-over gloss blue, which should be a lot more simple. And I should also mention we've also got a sprue map, although as you can see, there's not too many sprues, so it should be pretty simple to find all of the parts. So it looks like a pretty beginner-friendly kit, judging by the assembly guide. It would have been nice if it was done in color, but it's still pretty good, and it's reasonably easy to follow, and the marking choices I'm a really big fan of. So moving on to the plastic parts here, we've got them all in a single bag, which I shall open up using this knife. So we might as well start off with Sprue A here, and already you can tell this is a massive step up from the Hasegawa kit, even if it is pretty similar in how it's sort of laid out and assembled. So we'll start in this corner here with our horizontal stabilizers. As you can see, we've got both a upper and lower surface with some different details. All of it is recessed, which looks really fantastic. And then there's some raised parts here for parts of the trim tab and control system. I've got a really nice little fabric texture sort of simulated on the surface there. There does appear to be some discoloration in the plastic, but it doesn't appear to have affected the surface at all. It still feels pretty smooth, so I'm assuming that's just cosmetic rather than any really bad defects. But below that, we've then got our engine cowlings, which are much cleaner molded than the Hasegawa kit, although pretty similar in terms of their detail. We've got some nice recesses for each of the cylinder heads, and then for the main gearbox, there's some raised bumps there to simulate the rivets and some of the finer details. For our cockpit here, again, it's a step up. We've got some raised details for the sidewall sort of gauges and controls and that sort of stuff. And then we've got this sort of strange texture that almost looks like some sort of anti-slip matting by the foot wells for the rudders. And the rudder pedals themselves, pretty basic. And then there's this little bump here to sort of simulate, I guess, a leather cover or something for the control column to go into. And then there's a hole here for our seat to attach to. So the seats are pretty basic. There's no details really molded to it. And there does appear to be a few little imperfections in the surface detail, but nothing too bad. As mentioned, it's simplified. Usually a Corsair, or an early one at least, wouldn't have any kind of floor piece. It would sort of just be a bit of framework. You could probably actually cut this, I reckon, and just have the frames that you want present, so it looks a little bit better. It's not going to be a massively noticeable thing, but if you do want to get more accuracy, then that is probably something you're going to want to address. But if you're just building this one as a basic kit, it looks pretty good. Then we've got our fuselage halves here, and they look fantastic. We've got some really nice recessed panel lines, all very clean. Really nice fabric texturing on the rudder there. Some nice raised details on the trim tab controls. And we've also got some really fantastic recessed rivet details around the engine cowlings. All of our axis hatches look pretty good, even on the upper surface. And we've also got some antennas and the gun sight, by the looks of things, molded to the fuselage halves, which I'm not a huge fan of, because that means you can damage them a little bit more easily when you're handling the model early on in assembly. But hey, it's probably reasonably strong, and they do look quite good. On the inside, it looks like we've got some raised ribbing details and some sidewall details for probably some storage or little control boxes and that sort of thing. And on the left side, there's a little bit more of a basic sort of framework. Most of the tail is molded to the left side of the aircraft, and it does look like there's some ejector pin marks that you're going to have to really carefully remove so that you don't end up with a gap between the tail halves here, but otherwise looking pretty good. We've then got our instrument panel here, which consists of some very, very fine raised details. So you don't have any decal included for the instrument panels, so basically you're going to have to paint that black and then try and dry brush it with white. I don't mind doing this. I think you can get some pretty nice results, although it can be a little bit fiddly. Then we've got our radiators here, which are pretty basic, but they have had a little attempt at doing some details. Plus we've got our control stick here, which looks pretty good and nice and cleanly molded. Looks like that larger antenna, which was an optional part, which sort of goes on the front of the aircraft. And then we've got our propeller here, which is very cleanly molded and has some really nice details on it. Plus we've got our engine cowling just here with some very fine recessed details as well. Not quite as large and defined as on the fuselage halves here, but you can still see it, and with a little bit of a pin wash, I'm sure that will look really good. Moving on to Sprue B here, we have our little 200, or I think it might be a 500-pound bomb here in two halves. And we've got this little complicated pylon thingy that it attaches to and then goes onto the wings. We've got a very nicely done tail wheel here with a tail hook molded to it. And you can see the strut details are really nice and crisp. We've got some recessed details for the wheel hub there. So if you're very careful and steady when you paint this, you should get a really nice result. There is a bit of a seam line sort of running on the outside there, but with a little bit of light sanding that should clean up. Then for the main part on this sprue here, we've got the underside of the wing halves. They've done a really fantastic job molding all of these raised details for the flap hinges and the inside part of the wheel well. And then we've got really lovely recessed details all along the wing for all the axis hatches and a few little rivets. And we've got a really fantastic fabric texture there, which looks great. It appears they've molded the exhausts to the lower wing part here, which doesn't look too bad, although it would look a bit better if it was a separate part. I think they've done a pretty decent job there. We've then got our landing gear here in the corner with the wheels, and they appear to have a sort of light treaded pattern. Not a diamond one, which I think was a bit more common during the war, but they still look pretty good. On the inside, there's a rather nasty ejector pin mark, but there is some really nice raised details for the wheel hubs there. For our landing gear struts, they're pretty good as well. You might want to be a bit careful when cutting them off because they do look a little bit fragile, especially this little part coming out here. But otherwise, they look really quite good and cleanly molded. There doesn't even appear to be too much of a seam line on them either, so very crisp and detailed. And these parts here appear to be our connectors for the struts, and they have some really nice little recessed and raised details to them, so looking fantastic. And finally, we've got Sprue C here, which is the last sprue in the dark grey plastic. And in this corner, it contains our fuel tank here, which is pretty basic, but I do think it's as detailed as they kind of look. They are quite a simple little shape. And you can see they've molded the pylons, or the attachment points for them to the top part of the fuel tank. So pretty simple, but easy to add. Then we've got our landing gear doors for the tail wheel, and they have done a raised sort of portion in the center there for a tiny bit of detail, but you're probably not going to see too much of that. Then we've got our upper wings here. They've molded the pitot tube to the left wing half here, which again I'm not a huge fan of because then you can damage it while you're handling the model. Although I do like that they've actually added this little framework piece here to protect it from getting damaged. So they've done a really nice job, I think, engineering these sprues to protect the parts. There's some really nice recessed details on these upper wing halves here, as you can see, and they've done the fabric texture once again, which looks fantastic. The flat parts are actually molded to the upper part here, and they should join quite nicely to the lower wing, although there are a few ejector pin marks here which you might have to clean up. They've done a nice job here with the little step for the right wing side, and I like that they've done a deeper, more defined panel line between the control surfaces to give them a bit more depth. And finally, we've got our various main landing gear doors. So they're all pretty basic on the outside. On the inside, it looks like we've got a lot of recessed panel line details for them. Although it looks like there's a couple of ejector pin marks which are going to be a little bit of a pain to try and clean up. But for the most part, looks like they've done a really nice job doing the details. And finally, we come to our clear parts, which are protected in this separate little bag so they don't get scratched, which is good. And opening them up, as you can see, they're all protected as well on this sort of framework on the sprue, so contained within it. And they look all pretty good. They're pretty curved shapes, so there is a fair bit of distortion, but it looks a lot better than the Revell kit and quite similar to the Hasegawa one, I'd reckon. Although the framework, by the looks of things, is maybe... Oh, no, I think they've actually done the framework pretty similar. Usually with Academy kits, they'll have a proper raised edge for the framework, but in this case, they seem to have done what Hasegawa's done and just sort of done a single raised line. So that's going to be a lot harder to mask up, and I find it very tricky to use my technique of painting the frames and then cleaning them up with a cocktail stick when they're like this. But hopefully, with a little bit of time and patience, they should turn out okay. The front windshield also looks really good. Again, it's a very complicated curvy shape, so they've done a pretty good job capturing it. Probably not as good as some newer kits with thinner plastic and some better molding techniques. But for the most part, these clear parts look really quite good. And lastly, we have our decals. Now, in newer Academy kits, I've seen they've been using cartograph decals, just like with Airfix, and they're of really fantastic quality. Although I think that these ones are a bit older since they've got a older copyright and they don't have the cartograph logo. But there's no strange or blotchy film over any of them. The colors look pretty good. And most of the details are pretty nicely done. There are a few smaller decals, like these little red Japanese kill marks, and the various little logos for the propeller blades, and the common sort of stencils that's very distorted. I don't normally have any issues with the Academy decals, even with the older ones, but that's normally something that's a bit easier to tell once you're actually applying them. But for the most part, decals look passable, but definitely better from newer kits. So that wraps up my initial look at the Academy F4U-1A Corsair. Although this kit has a few parts that are a little bit simplified or inaccurate, and the decals are of medium quality, I would say it's definitely a big step up from the old Hasegawa kit, and probably about on par with the Revell Corsair. Having said that though, there's some really nice details, assembly looks really simple, and as mentioned, I paid $21.95 AUD from Hobbyrama, which I think is a pretty reasonable price for a nice simple kit in this scale. I'm looking forward to having a build of this kit. I'm tempted to do it just out of the box as a very simple build, even if it's not 100% accurate. Although then again, I am going to be 3D printing a fair few Corsair bits to improve some of the other ones we've looked at, so if I've got them, I am thinking I might as well just use them on this one as well. I'm probably going to have a bit of trouble as well picking the schemes because I really like both of the ones included in this one, so it may be that I end up doing a second Academy Corsair if I really want to. So that wraps up our look at the Academy F4U-1A Corsair. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video and got something out of it. If you did, please be sure to leave a like. And if you have any questions or stories about building this kit yourself, then please be sure to leave it down in the comments section below. Next week, I plan to have a look at the highly regarded Tamiya F4U-1D Corsair kit, which is apparently one of the best in the scale, so we'll be putting that theory to the test. And I'll also plan And I also plan to have a vote up for which scheme you guys want to see me do from this kit. I honestly couldn't decide between either of the schemes in this kit because I both really liked them, so I thought I'd put it to you guys to make that decision for me. So if you want to have your say, be sure to check out the poll coming out next week. Otherwise though, until the next video, as always, take care and model on.